the NotebookLM duo discusses the art of mystery writing around the Orchid Strategy, a book by Bristol Bazaar. Part 1.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something new today, the world of mystery writing.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah. And our guide for this deep dive is the Orchid Strategy. We'll be looking at excerpts, like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain of how a mystery is made.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And don't worry if you're not an author yourself. Even if you just love a good mystery, I think there's a lot to unpack here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the novel kicks off by introducing us to Quentin, our main guy.
Okay.
And he's an orchid dealer.
An orchid dealer. I like it already. It's not your typical protagonist.
Right. It hints at this whole hidden world right from the start. What kind of people buy orchids, right? And what secrets might be lurking amongst those flowers.
Yeah.
And there's this one line that really stuck with me. A client is looking for orchids that are, quote, aware of the infinite variety, the uniqueness, and the struggles of life in the wild.
Wow. That's some pretty deep stuff for an orchid shopping list.
Right. But it does so much more than just describe the orchids. It tells us something about the client, their motivations, maybe even hints at the kind of dangers Quentin might get caught up in.
It's like foreshadowing wrapped up in a beautiful description.
Totally. And speaking of intriguing characters, we also meet Mr. Mystery Shopper.
Okay, that's a name that definitely sparks curiosity.
Right. And the author keeps his identity a secret at first, slowly revealing bits and pieces as the story unfolds.
Classic mystery move. Keeps the reader on the hook, trying to figure out who this guy is and what he wants.
Exactly. It's like those old movies where you only see the villain's shadow for the first half. You're dying to see their face.
Oh, I love that.
And the author uses these really cool descriptions to capture the dynamic between Quentin and Mr. Mystery Shopper. At first, it's like they're in a Cold War state, all tense and suspicious, but then it shifts to detente.
Ooh, I like that. It adds a historical parallel, makes their interactions feel even more significant, and it shows how the relationship is evolving without explicitly saying it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it adds so much depth.
It's those little details that really elevate a mystery.
Now, we can't forget about the orchids themselves. The author uses their unique characteristics, deception, adaptation, survival, to mirror the complexities of the plot.
Orchids are already fascinating on their own, but using them symbolically like that, genius.
It's like the orchids become another character in the story. And there's this one example, the Ophrys epifera orchid, that pretends to be a female bee to attract pollinators.
Oh, I've heard of that one. It tricks the male bees into, well, you know.
Yeah, and it plays into this whole theme of deception, which we see a lot of in the human characters too.
Right, so it's both a cool fact about orchids and a hint at what's to come in the story.
Exactly. And then things take a bit of a dark turn. We're introduced to its Sansa, a shrunken head.
Whoa, hold on. Shrunken head, where did that come from?
It's found in the Jardin des Plantes greenhouse. Talk about an unexpected twist.
That's one way to up the stakes. It instantly makes the mystery more intense, and you're left wondering, how does this fit in?
And the Jardin des Plantes itself is almost like a character in the story. The author's descriptions are so vivid, you feel like you're right there, surrounded by all these exotic plants and interesting people.
It's like a world within a world. And it's not just a pretty backdrop, right? The Jardin des Plantes is integral to the mystery, adding another layer of complexity.
Absolutely. And speaking of complexity, there are so many characters introduced in these excerpts, from scientists to possible criminals.
A whole cast of suspects, each with their own secrets and connections to the mystery. It makes you wonder who to trust, who's playing what role.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing.
Exactly. And then there's the dialogue. It's sharp, witty, and the author uses it to do so much more than just convey information.
I know. It reveals character, moves the plot forward, and even adds a touch of humor.
It's like eavesdropping on a really engaging conversation, and you're constantly picking up on clues and subtext.
Okay, so we've got these intriguing characters, a mysterious setting, a shrunken head, and a whole lot of questions.
The author is weaving a masterful web of suspense. I can't wait to see where it all leads.
So we've talked about creating compelling characters and setting the scene. Now let's focus on how the Orchid Strategy blends real-world details with the fictional mystery. We meet Professor Spencer, the ethnobotanist. He's not just a character, but a source of fascinating information.
Right. He's like this bridge between science and storytelling. He's an expert, passionate about orchids, but also caught up in this whole intrigue. It makes him relatable, even if you're not a botanist yourself.
Absolutely. There's this great scene where he's talking about orchids, their ability to adapt, even deceive. He mentions the Dracula Simia orchid, the one that looks like it has a monkey face. Eerie, yet beautiful.
Yeah, it adds a touch of the strange to the story. It's a great example of how to weave real-world details into your fiction. As mystery writers, what are your areas of interest, your expertise? Could you bring those into your writing?
Yeah, it's like you're adding those little Easter eggs for the readers who are into those topics, but without alienating the ones who aren't. And it makes the world you're creating so much more believable. Like Spencer also gets into a debate about genomics and the new plant classification system.
Right.
A bit technical, but it adds another layer to his character.
Yeah, it shows his dedication to his field, but it opens up this broader conversation, right? About knowledge, ethics, scientific progress, themes that can resonate with readers, even if they're not scientists themselves.
So it's not just about dropping in random facts. It's about how those facts connect to character development, thematic exploration.
Exactly, and it gives your story that extra depth and authenticity.
Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the investigators. We meet Inspector Lefol, who's tasked with solving this whole Sansa mystery.
Yeah, Lefol. He's interesting because he represents the audience, in a way.
Yep.
He's thrown into this world of orchids and scientific jargon, and he's clearly out of his depth.
Right, a bit of a fish out of water, but that's what makes him so relatable.
Exactly. As readers, we're often in the same boat, right? We're piecing together clues alongside the detective.
We're learning alongside him, experiencing the twists and turns with him, and as he interviews different characters, we get more pieces of the puzzle.
It highlights the importance of that investigative process in a mystery. You know, it's not just about the solution, it's about the journey of getting there.
Right, like with Marcel, the antique dealer, and José, the one-eyed man, they provide clues about Quentin's past, the shady world he might be involved in.
Right, and each encounter adds a new layer of complexity, weaving this web of connections that the reader has to untangle.
And then there's Edmonde, head of the central office. She's this shadowy figure pulling strings behind the scenes.
Right, she represents those higher levels of authority, the deeper layers of intrigue. Her involvement suggests that this is bigger than we initially thought.
And she's shrouded in mystery, like we never really know what she's up to, whose side she's on. And that ambiguity, it's so effective.
Absolutely. As you're writing, think about introducing those characters who operate in the shadows, whose motives remain unclear. It keeps those readers guessing.
So we've got this complex web of characters, interconnected through the Sansa, the Orchids, this Blue Lotus organization. What does it all mean?
That's the question, isn't it? The author's dangling those threads of intrigue, leaving us with more questions than answers.
Which is what a good mystery does, right?
Yeah.
It's about the journey, the twists and turns.
Exactly, the gradual unraveling of the truth. And this book, The Orchid Strategy, it does it brilliantly.
It keeps you hooked.
Yeah.
Speaking of keeping readers engaged, let's talk about how the author uses symbolism.
The NotebookLM duo discusses the art of mystery writing around The Orchid Strategy, a book by Bristol Bazaar. Part 2.
We talked about the orchids, but there's another element, the ant.
Yes. The business card with the ant on it.
Right, the one found with the Sansa.
Specifically, it's the Formica archboldi, the ant that decorates its nest with the skulls of its prey.
It's both fascinating and disturbing.
The symbolism's powerful. The ant, like that Sansa, represents death, collection, a fascination with the macabre. It foreshadows the darker elements, hints at the lengths some characters will go to.
It's amazing how a detail that small can carry so much weight. Makes you realize that every element in your story can have symbolic meaning.
Exactly. The objects, creatures, even the colors you introduce, how can you use them to foreshadow, to represent themes, add those deeper layers of meaning?
And it's not just the ant as a symbol of death. The author, through Murray Lore, she's the entomologist, encourages us to think about the ant's behavior on a deeper level. Like, is there something more than just survival driving its actions?
Right, right. It raises these fascinating questions about human nature. Are we so different from the ant? Do we also collect, display objects, sometimes gruesome ones, to assert dominance, showcase power, or just some primal urge?
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
It adds this philosophical dimension to the whole mystery. We've uncovered so much in the Orchid Strategy. So far, vivid descriptions, those complex characters, the symbolism. Now let's see how it all comes together. We left off with a web of intrigue. The Sansa, the Ant Clan, and Quentin's shadowy past.
Yeah, the author doesn't disappoint. Remember those questions we had about Quentin? Well, the truth comes out. We learn about his past smuggling activities, his time in prison. It reminds you that even the most harmless-seeming characters can have dark secrets.
It's like the author took all those little hints, those suspicions we had about Quentin, and turned them up to 11.
Exactly.
And then there's that second business card, the one with the Formica Archboldy ant on it, found hidden in Quentin's shop.
Oh, yeah. It connects him directly to the Ant Clan. Suggests a much deeper level of involvement than we first thought.
Talk about raising the stakes. And just when you think you're starting to understand the scope of this whole thing, the author throws in another curveball: staff protests at the Jardin des Plantes.
Oh, right. The barcode readers.
Yeah, they're upset about the new system for classifying plants. Seems unrelated, but could it be a distraction?
It's a great way to heighten the tension, create that sense of uncertainty. Like, is it just a coincidence or is something more sinister going on?
It makes you question everything.
And it plays into Spencer's paranoia, too. Remember, he's convinced someone's trying to sabotage him.
Right, which just adds to the overall feeling that something's not right.
And then we have Levin, that Italian company. A bit shady, right? They're interested in Spencer's work.
They bring in a whole other dimension to the mystery. Like, maybe the stakes are even higher than we thought.
Exactly. Corporate espionage, international intrigue. It expands the scope without losing sight of those core elements.
And then the biggest twist of all, Louis, the graduate student.
Oh, yeah, Louis.
He's revealed to be an undercover agent.
Talk about a shocker. Makes you realize you can't trust anyone in this story.
So it all comes together. The Sansa, the Orchids, the Ant Clan, all connected through this complex smuggling operation. And the mastermind, Quentin.
It's like the author's tying all those loose ends together, that intricate web of connections. And it's a good reminder that in a mystery, everything should connect, but in a way that's both satisfying and surprising.
But even with the mystery solved, there's still that feeling of unease.
Yeah.
Like the larger forces at play, those operating in the shadows, they're still out there.
Right. It leaves you with that lingering question. What else is going on beneath the surface?
And that's the mark of a really good mystery, isn't it? It stays with you.
The Orchid Strategy does that brilliantly. It's captivating, unsettling, and so well crafted.
So what can we, as aspiring mystery writers, learn from all this?
I think it's a masterclass in world building. Creating complex characters, intricate plots, those thought-provoking themes. The author shows us the power of description, symbolism, and how to use a diverse cast of characters to really draw the reader in.
I know I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while.
Me too. And if you haven't already, definitely check out the Orchid Strategy. Pay attention to those techniques we've talked about and see how you can apply them to your own writing.
Create your own mysteries that are just as captivating and unsettling as this one.
Exactly. Keep those readers guessing, surprise them, and leave them wanting more. That's the magic of a great mystery.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.